You're listening to Everything Out There with your host, Steve Stockton.
Hello, friends. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm Steve Stockton. You're listening to Everything Out There on the Clyde Lewis Ground Zero Radio Network. Thank you for joining me tonight. I want to welcome special guest this evening, Star Fox from the North American Dogman Project. Come on in, buddy.
Mr. Stockton, you legend, you. I am so glad to be here. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you for joining us here. Just by way of introduction, then I'll let you introduce yourself, tell people what you're into, what you've got going on with the North American Dogman Project there, and there will be links to everything you mentioned in the show notes.
Perfect. I appreciate it. A long story short is I'm a journalist, historian, and researcher for the North American Dogman Project. And what we do is we dive into mysterious animal encounters that are not able to be verified, and we are trying to bring science to it. And I collect as many encounters that are verified as possible, sit down with witnesses, verify or debunk things in my own eyes before I forward them on to my leader, Jody Cook, and one of my best friends and others such as Shane Michael Crisp that can really help me solidify what's going on. So we work as a team. It's not a one-person thing figuring out whether we want to verify an encounter or not. And I'm just really trying to get some scientific light and bring it to the public eyes what we've stumbled upon.
Good deal. And I was not real familiar with Dogman until just a few years ago, but what little bit of looking into it that I've done, there's encounters here anyway in this country going back to the European settlers. One of the earliest documented sightings I was able to find was in 1887 in Wexford County, Michigan, where a couple of lumberjacks ran into some bipedal creature that looked like the size or bigger than a man, but had a dog's head. And just all throughout the 19th and 20th century there were sightings that have come to light through research and things. So, and then there's modern sightings. And then again, it tends to be, I see a lot of stuff from Michigan. There's a DJ there, Steve Cook, that released a song called The Legend as kind of a prank. And then all these people started saying that they had sightings of this creature. What do you think about that?
You were spot on with all of that in regards of what you just stated. So kudos right there. Michigan is definitely an old school hot spot. Yet before I touch on that, I also would like to blow a few people's mind and even inform that Christopher Columbus, he himself stated that he had interactions with seeing some of these strange upright bipedal canine creatures. And also when he spoke to a ton of the natives, they as well warned him to be very afraid of these creatures. And when it comes to Michigan, I think what occurred with that song is it definitely probably flexed a few people to elaborate on maybe something they were unable to describe, meaning with our minds being as smart as humans like to think we are, we try to process things. And if we can't understand it, our mind plugs in pieces, which obviously can occur with misidentifying what it is you're seeing. But I do believe something is occurring there because, as you stated, rewind to the 1800s, way before this song came out and way before the Gable film was debunked, you had individuals speaking about seeing this. And right around the time of the lumberjack case, you had a little girl that was taken. And when she was found, she was in a burrow/den where she said, "Mr. Wolfman brought me there and is feeding me berries." And when asked why she didn't answer these people yelling for her, she said that Mr. Wolf wouldn't allow her to. He got angry. Interesting. So right around all these time frames, again, way before this song came out, you have these hotspot interactions in the Michigan area, Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky. Right around that spot is probably some of the most hot areas for dogman activity.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard about the reports from Christopher Columbus, but that is mind blowing. And so a lot of the theories on it, as far as it being some kind of government hybrid or something like that, that would kind of blow those out of the water, at least for the initial sightings, the early sightings, because I've heard that story that or one of the theories that they're trying to build like a super soldier or something and came up with a human canine hybrid, but who knows? I mean, maybe it's both.
What you just tapped on is, again, 100%, and I agree. And I will dissect that for a second, meaning, yeah, fast forward to now, World War II, World War I, around those times when you had people like Stalin trying to build a super ape army, you had the Nazis experimenting on humans. I have a case I covered, Selly Nexus, where the American infantry unit came into an old Nazi townhouse that had been flooded on the lower levels and also fresh concrete. Long story short, they sent in 3 specialized divers. 2 of them did not come back. Only the tethers came back. The third guy, when he pulled to the surface, pretty much was irate and just losing his mind, just terrified, saying that there was occult symbols all over the place in the flooded rooms, people's body parts, dismemberments in one room. There were people chained to a chair with human heads. Some had goat heads, wolf heads, dog heads. So we know, again, that the Nazis and the Russians and people like that were tapping into those things. And also, just recently in the news, they showed how a group of individuals messed up when they were trying something on mice and certain body parts were growing in wrong areas. Yeah. So now the variations, when people are seeing all these different types, that is definitely going to fall into the government messing around with things and admitting to it. I mean, you have Lauren Donaldson and Dr. Barr around the Manhattan time. They were admitted that they were experimenting on apex predators because Lauren Donaldson was brought in after he was able to create this thing called the Donaldson trout that can live in fresh water, salt water, cold water, warm water. It's pretty much you can kill the fish, but it's a really hardy fish. And around that time frame, we were teaching dolphins to basically be able to figure out if Russians and others were coming into our nuclear sites. We would teach these dolphins to prick you with like a little bit of an inflatable that had a beacon on it. You'd float up to the surface, beep, beep, beep. They're waiting for you. What are you doing in our area? So these 2 doctors, or whatever you'd like to call them, scientists, mad scientists, geniuses, again, pick your choice. They stated 3 different times these apex predators, they experimented on them, and they also stated they escaped. They got the majority of them back. Ever since then, around that time frame, people claim to see what they call the Klickitat ape cat in Washington State, which is basically looks like a canine ape type panther. But then in the past, like you were stating, when you talk about things like the cynocephali in 290 BC, all the way back in the Greek times, you have Alexander the Great speaking of how he fought alongside of these creatures and against them, and how they lived up in the mountains and they wore shaggy clothing and also furs of the animals they would prey on. But they could come down and communicate with very primitive barks and sign language, but they understood what you were trying to relay to them, and they would trade with you. Okay, this is Alexander the Great. Why is he even wasting his time reiterating something like that when he is hell-bent on conquering something? What purpose does that, serve in his accomplishments of being great? And then in 2001, around that time frame, Jody Cook in Iraq had reports of some of the merchants, again, describing what were, quote unquote, cynocephali that lived high up in the mountains and would come down and trade. Rewind, you have Herodotus now, again, around the Alexander the Great time, speaking of these tribes of cynocephali that lived up in the northern mountains of India, as well as Africa and other areas. Interesting.
Yeah, very much so. And something that you stated just a few minutes ago that I want to go back and touch on, the story about the little girl who claimed the wolf man or the dog man or whatever it was, kept her safe and fed her berries. I've covered some other missing person cases like that where it was a child, and I think one girl said it was a bear that cuddled her and fed her berries, and another boy said a big dog kept him company. Well, dogs might keep you company, but a bear is not going to cuddle a child and feed it berries and things. So then these are really small children. I think that there was something that wasn't a bear and that it wasn't a normal dog that these children had encountered. And it's strange. There's a lot of cases like that that don't make a lot of sense about the whatever creature it is. And there's a guy on YouTube, South Force 10. I don't know if you've ever seen his channel or not, but he talks about these feral human Bigfoot hybrids in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park area. And he claims that his relatives that were from the area were hired by the government to go in there prior to becoming a national park and thin these creatures out because they were cannibals. They would steal and eat humans. So I don't know. That kind of blurs some lines there. I mean, is it Bigfoot? Is it Dogman? Is it both the above? Is it there some strange creature that's both? And I have a couple of pastors from Sound the Shofar Messianic Ministries that I've had on the show a few times. And they find, evidence in the Bible of these creatures, whether it be the Nephilim or something, but it sounds like it's something supernatural to a degree. And then, I don't know, it's one of those things that you can hear theories that hold water that make sense about several different things that it could be. So as of yet, I don't have any answers. I gave up years ago trying to find answers. I'm just looking for the next set of questions. And then the thing about the dolphins that you were talking about, there was a thriller/sci-fi movie back in the early 70s called Day of the Dolphin, where a marine biologist, George C. Scott, was in it. And they were training dolphins, doing research in the Florida Keys, taught them primitive English. Well, then two of the dolphins were kidnapped, and it turned out that there was some sort of foundation that had sinister intentions that wanted to use these dolphins to carry explosives and detonate. I think it's the president's yacht or something like that. So there have been a lot of monkeying around, if you pardon the phrase, with animals and things, and GMO foods and things that we have. That's one of the other rumors or urban legends is that Kentucky Fried Chicken changed their name to KFC because technically what they're serving is not chicken. It's been modified so that they have like more wings and legs and breasts than a normal chicken. So, they grow one and can get 6 different parts out of it for each of those. But that's supposedly been debunked, but who knows? I wouldn't put anything past big government, big pharma, or big profits for that matter.
That is straight up nightmare fuel and so much to respond to. Yes, I definitely agree on that. I will first touch base on, I have a sinister theory in regards of when they say that they're being cuddled and fed berries by them. I don't really think that's what's occurring. I think it's like a Hansel and Gretel type thing. I think they're feeding these children berries and things to potentially sweeten them up before they eat them, as messed up as that sounds. But I do believe that's what's occurring, because the Dennis Martin case, an old school version, there was a family that saw what they believed was a large dog or bear man carrying him away. And Les Stroud debunked what was told to him, not him directly, but told to us, the public, about how a person could have easily made it to that area at that point in time and that distance. Well, Les Stroud is arguably the best survivalist in the world, and he was unable to do it in that time frame. So something did take that child, and I do believe, as I said, I think they're trying to make them like we do with the turkey on Thanksgiving or something. What do we do? We put stuffing and berries and things to flavor our food. And also, the way I approach the dog man is I believe it's a potential ancestor of either the Amphicenoidae, which was neither canine or bear. It was a relative in between, and it looked potentially like some of the bear man or larger dog man sightings. And if you look at its skeletal structure, scientists believe it was able to walk bipedally and quadrupedally pretty easily. And also, now when people say they see large baboon type werewolf looking creatures, you had the Dinopithecus, which is an enormous baboon that also could have easily came up on the land bridge when all the continents were connected. But okay, fine, we'll push those two aside. We have cave hyenas now. We have hyenas that lived in North America and Europe. And hyenas are super hardy creatures, and they're not canine or cat either. There's something strange, but they're more feline than canine, I would say, if you have to pick a version. And they lived in caves. And just recently in Saudi Arabia, a large cave was found with hundreds and maybe even thousands of human bones and animal bones, where these hyenas were pulling their prey back to deep spots in these caves, and they stumbled upon this by mistake. Okay, so some of the maps I sent you where people are going missing, those are all cave systems. Hyenas live in caves, as did the cave hyenas, but hyenas also dig strange dens and burrows, which are spotted in a ton of areas that lead deep down into the ground, kind of like a trap door area. Okay, so these areas, these people are going missing in all the mountains. Sure, some are misfortunate, some are normal animal predation, which is usually very easy to see, a sign of struggle, being pulled away, etc. And something else is taking people. Think for a second, if a cave hyena or a relative of it did exist still, and it pulled these people back to the caves, how many people are sent to actually search caves for missing people or deep in? I think we know less about cave systems than we do the ocean and outer space. So if something is pulling people into the cave systems, we're not going to find their remnants. And I don't approach the dog man as okay, I'm going to break and blow some people's mind for a second. Skinwalkers and Wendigos, that's more of your term if someone wants to use the term werewolf, but there's still a difference there as well. Werewolf is more of a curse, okay? And when someone takes the form of a skinwalker, if you look at all the terminologies of it, it usually means he who walks on all fours or being on all fours. So they change into the actual animal itself, but you still have your human intellect. The dogman doesn't do that. So if people are seeing things potentially that are portals and stuff, that's out of my realm of how I approach it. So I gear that towards people that are more knowledgeable, but I feel like that's more of hellhoundish, paranormal, dark magic type things when people see this manifestation. I've taken so many encounters where people have taken straight up shots at the dogman, blown off pieces of its chest. Yeah, it still came at them. It spit up blood. It howled. There's cases of trying to open doors, open windows. People have seen them drinking water, digging burrows, eating things, leaving footprints. To me, those are all signs of a living entity, which is why I referred to some of the potential ancestors that fall into the category of the types. Like type 3 dogmen are listed as hyena-looking like animals. I don't approach it as this thing is super comfortable on all twos, bipedally, and just walks around like your Hollywood werewolf. Yes, what does a bear do to look more menacing? It pushes itself up onto two legs, and now it's big. But when people track the dog man, in a lot of the cases, when you see how it's running and its gait, it's going from quadrupedal to bipedal, meaning we're actually working on a biometric version of a dog man that's based off type 1, which is your traditional Helsing looking type werewolf, or the howling, and how it's running. So what we think it does is it's gaining speed as it's on all fours, and then it will push itself up, and then it can be on its hind legs and yes, run, and now use its front arms as to open your doors and look more menacing. Because I mean, think, sure, if it's the size of a small black bear on all fours, yeah, that's scary. But then if it pushes itself up and now it's 6 to 8 feet tall and it can use its front longer arms or legs, however you'd like to refer to it, as weapons, it's more menacing. But like I said, I don't approach this as it's some crazy, always up on two legs, transforming on the full moon. I think there's something real here. I think there's some sort of ancestral aspect that we're missing.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I lived out in the high desert, New Mexico, for about a year, near the Four Corners area. I was right in the corner of the Navajo reservation in Farmington, and there's a lot of strange tales out there in the desert of the skinwalkers and things. In fact, when I was out there, I don't know if you're familiar with Seth Breedlove, Small Town Monsters outfit that do a lot of documentaries and things. They came out there, and I was interviewed for the latest documentary. It's called The Skinwalkers, American Werewolves 2. You can find it on, I think it's on Amazon Prime Video and other places. But there's a difference there in those. Those are, like you said, there's a dark magic or some kind of tribal magic or something going on. And a lot of those skinwalkers, that's a curse. There's, depending on which tribe is telling it, some of those people bear that curse because they were cannibals that came upon them from eating human flesh. So that brings in a whole other realm. And then you mentioned Dennis Martin. I talk about that case all the time. That's the one that got me interested in missing people. Father's Day, 1969. I lived in Knoxville, Tennessee, the same town that Dennis was from. He was not quite a year older than me. I was 5 going on 6. He was 6 going on 7. And of course, that was big news all over East Tennessee in that area. And I followed that case from day one. I remember him talking about it on the news that night. And then the two newspapers Knoxville had at the time, the morning paper was the Knoxville Journal and the evening paper was the Knoxville News Sentinel. I got every day I would scan through the papers, and somewhere I've got a couple of scrapbooks full of clippings from back in the day. And that was one of those, every day I thought, oh, they're going to find him. Something's going to, he's going to turn up. Never did. And in my little 5, almost 6-year-old mind, I thought, well, we don't live that far from the Smokies. It's only about an hour, and it was an hour by car. But I thought, well, maybe he wandered down here, and I lived out in the country on a 26.5-acre farm. And I got out on the rural country road that we lived on my little Schwinn Stingray, and looked in the weeds for him. I thought, maybe he's down here. Maybe he's tired, scared, or hungry. But still looking for him. That was just one of those cases there. The whole thing is just, parts have supposedly been debunked and rebunked and unbunked, whatever you want to say. But yeah, the Key family claimed that they were looking for a bear, and a ranger had sent them down to an area where they could see a bear. And they said, depending on, again, which story you hear, they saw what looked like a man with shaggy furs or something on, running up the hillside of one of those hollers and carrying something red over its shoulder right after they'd heard a blood-curdling scream. Well, Dennis was wearing a red jacket or sweater, so could have been, who knows. And then you had the Army Rangers in there. Now, the official story is they were just in the area on maneuvers and showed up. But you and I both know the Army Rangers don't typically show up and help look for missing children. I think there was more to that story, and that's, very conspiracy theory-ish. But a lot of those conspiracy theories are conspiracy fact. Firsthand example, my father worked out at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and Operation Paperclip, where the U.S., the government brought over a lot of those top Nazi scientists and things. Oh, that never happened, but yet it did. My dad worked right alongside some of those guys, and I've told this story before, but there was a kid that I went home with from school one day. I won't say his last name because he's still around. I think he's a sheriff's deputy or something now. But went over, we were playing around. We were down he lived in a basement rancher house. And back then, a lot of people had like a family room or a rec room downstairs. So we were down there watching TV. And he's like, come here, I want to show you something. So he goes to the back of the room and had the wood grain paneling, that was popular back then. And he pushes on it and it opens up. And I thought, okay, he's going to show me a bomb shelter. A lot of post-war and Cold War era houses, especially around East Tennessee, had bomb shelters or fallout shelters. And I thought, okay, that's cool. I've seen them before. We didn't have one, but I knew people that had those in their basement. Thought he's going to show me their bomb shelter. Okay. So he opens it up, turns on a light. I walk in, and there was the biggest collection of Nazi memorabilia I've ever seen in anybody's home, especially. It was museum quality stuff. And I'll call him Tom. I said, wow, Tom, your dad really likes his war memorabilia. And he pointed to a uniform, a Nazi uniform that was in a plexiglass case. He said, you don't understand. He said, this is my dad's uniform. My mind was blown. I was in like 7th grade or something. So there you go. But Operation Paperclip didn't happen. Au contraire.
Jeez, that is mind blowing and some straight up nightmare fuel right there. you tap right onto it. You're spot on with pretty much everything you're stating and just how you approach things in general. And actually, an interesting, I'm not even sure if I can ever verify this, but we have a coin, or I should say, I have a coin, a penny, that supposedly belonged to a German werewolf or a Nazi werewolf, which is, there's no way to potentially ever verify it, which is still pretty cool to have a piece of history, but just to know when you realize what it is they were up to, it's also a little bit intriguing to realize how advanced they were, but how messed up. And the human experimentation, just recently, I can't remember which high up Nazi general, but they found more bodies that were missing limbs and all kinds of things showing signs of experimentation. And then, as you stated, when we took on, I believe, Eric Trumpf, or I can't fully pronounce his last name, but he ran Plum Island, which was based off of a exact replica of where he did experimentation on insects and food, just to basically slow down invading armies. And ticks were easy carriers of Lyme disease, etc. So no, you state all that perfectly. And I wanted to touch base on the thing with Dennis Martin and also other people that go missing. Look at how you trapdoor spiders, and there's also another insect that does it to ants in the desert. It makes like a little funnel type area that blends in. But as I stated previously, we have a ton of cases where people have seen these strange burrows that are covered with bent down trees and other things, but they go really deep into the ground. And certain animals, yes, make burrows, but they don't design burrows like that. It's almost like a trap door, and they lead really deep down. So think if you're walking by yourself or even in a group and you are the one in the end, boom, something can snag you real quick, pulls you down this trap door, meaning brush and loose people in front of you don't really necessarily realize immediately where you were. They turn around, right? You're gone. They run back to where you were. They're looking around. But how many people are moving around leaves on the ground to potentially find a hole that leads down into a cave system or something, or moving brush around like that? They're not. They're panicking, running back up and down the trail, screaming your name, then calling for help. People leave. No one comes back. Boom, you're gone. So like I said, I have a huge feeling and theory that we would find a ton of these missing people in these cave systems. Again, I don't know what's taking them, but something is. And also, I don't know if you're familiar with the Yuba County Five. No one really knows what happened with those 5 gentlemen. And the problem with them is they were, all right, I think for the time frame, people were just being inconsiderate when they said they were slow, because one worked on his car all the time and they were able to drive to basketball games and hang out. I think at that point in time, people were, I guess, not as compassionate with how they worded things. You know what I mean? So just because someone doesn't talk all the time or is different, back then someone could be like, oh, they're slow. But that doesn't mean that, because like I said, one guy worked on his car all the time and kept it in prime shape. And I like to consider myself a smart individual, but I can't work on a car. So does that make me slow? You know, to be able to work on a car, you at least have to be pretty intelligent. So these boys head to a basketball game. They were seen getting candy and stuff and food. And it's a straight shot. They've done this before. Okay, so think for a second now. As they're coming back, all they got to do is go straight. Something forced them to take that left, which was the only other way they could have gone, which put them up into this mountain area. Okay, so what did that? What was standing potentially in the middle of the road? I've had a ton of different cases where people see upright bipedal werewolf looking type creatures standing on the side of the road, potentially trying to flag them down, running beside their car, trying to open them. So let's just roll with this for a second. Say you see that, or they saw that in the middle of the road. Most people are going to take that left, correct? If it's standing in the middle of the road where you're trying to go, I know I wouldn't stop my car. I'd be like, holy crap. So, okay, they go up to this area. keep in mind, this kid loved his car. Okay. His family said his car was pretty much like his baby girl, his girlfriend. This was his dream. The car was just abandoned. Okay. The windows were rolled down and they just got out and ran. One of the doors was open. And when people got to the scene, they said the car could have easily been pushed out of this snow that it was in. So it wasn't stuck. What again scared them so much now that they felt the only thing they could possibly do is run wildly out into the forest. They run, they end up finding like shelter in this abandoned type structure, like a small building. I believe only one of them was found, and he had frostbite all over his feet, and he had access to food in an area he could have potentially got to. But what kept him so scared inside of that cabin to starve himself to death?
Yeah, so that's a fascinating case. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I had Drew Beeson on. He's an author, and he wrote a book about the Yuba County Five, among other things. He wrote about D.B. Cooper and Zodiac Killer. But that was kind of one of the things that we talked about, was that something scared them, because the one guy that they found, they believed that he had been alive for, I think it was 3 months or so, because of his beard growth. He had been clean shaven, and he did have a frostbite and things, but somebody had wrapped him in some sheets, I think. And it made no sense. They had food. I think there was propane or something there they could have used as a heat source. But the two of them they found outside, what was left of them, their bones. And then the other, there was one that they never found. So, and yeah, they were developmentally delayed, I think is the nice way to put it. But yeah, they were slow, and but functioning, highly functioning. Some of them, at least one and maybe two of them had been in the military.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, but I'm with you. I think something scared them, and they hid in that. I think it's a Forestry Service cabin or something there, and not even sure why they went up that way. Anyways, the way they had been before, and it was pretty much a straight shot. But something chased them. Something got after them. I don't know, a human, some kind of monster type creature. I don't know, but that case is very, very strange, and sadly, I don't think we'll ever have all the answers for that one, but it's one of those just imponderables that you like to ponder about, because there's so many different ways that could have happened, and yet there's no way that it should have happened based on the people and where they were supposed to be and what they had at their disposal once they got to that cabin.
100% again. And like you said, it has to, my realm, all I spend my time on is the Dogman. I mean, there are other things I find intriguing, but I don't research those. I literally am a journalist about the Dogman. So as far as I know, if it potentially was a UFO abduction, again, this is way out of my realm. Why would the car not have been taken too if something zapped you up? I mean, I don't know. And also, like you said, why would they have been found inside the structure? And if they were completely abducted, potentially, if someone wants to roll with that theory, well, those people that are abducted don't come back. Like, so why would their remains have been found? I agree. Something must have scared them enough to not want to go in that direction. And I look at all the news articles I sent you that literally scream, I don't want to use the word cover up, but yeah, cover up. And if you read deep into those, not yourself, but just people, you can see the red dots and you can see the black dots. You see how it all connects. You see what they're giving you, but you see also the truth as to what occurred. I mean, how many people are realistically being carried away like Corey Godsley or Brenda Hamilton by large, massive feral dogs? Or if you look at the young country singer up in Canada that supposedly was killed by coyotes, even though that's never even happened before. And in the area, they found 2 coyotes that had no signs of attacking a human or any human remains inside of them, but they blamed that on the coyotes. Yet, where are the unknown canine DNA samples coming from? So if they tell you that they found something unknown canine, well, they know what it is. They're just telling us that because that's what they're going to tell you. But if it's unknown, they would know if it was a German Shepherd, etc. But in plenty of cases with saliva and blood that maybe off something it had eaten. People have gotten strange DNA samples, hair samples. Again, so what is it that, like, what's occurring here? People are missing. Unknown footprints are being found. I mean, we have a master tracker that spent his whole entire life out in the woods, and that's what he does. He literally looks at all the tracks that we have. He can tell you whether it's a bear track, a blue heron track. Man, that guy's debunked so many things for us. We have him stumped on some tracks. He's stumped on some of the own tracks he's got. We have an environmentalist that is working with us that seems to think cave hyenas were definitely hardy enough to survive through evolution, and we don't spend that much time in caves. We have former law enforcement, current law enforcement that look into some of the situations and are baffled. We have people that specialize in weapons. Like, we had a group of coyotes that, before we posted anything about it, we wanted to make sure that some sicko didn't just chain these animals up and blow them away and try to tell us that they were a dogman attack. Well, we were able to have people be like, no way, that's animal bites. There's no way bullets could have done this, et cetera, et cetera. So when we approach this, we're not just, reading off an email or just rolling with what it is that is submitted to us. We're really trying to bring scientific life to the matter because, as I stated, people are missing. There are ancestral relatives that could fall into the terminology of dogman. There's unknown footprints that we cannot verify, nor can people that are specialized in it. What's happening? Like, there's dismemberment in animals. What's a dog usually do? A domesticated dog or wolves, what do? They just shred their prey. They just rip it apart. Well, there's been a case in New Jersey where these two young boys were playing, and one of them asked the other one, do you want to go see my friend? And the kid was like, okay. So they go into the forest, and there's this old raggedy cabin with all these chewed up, like, little kid toys there that basically this other kid had been bringing to whoever was in this cabin. And he's like, yeah, look inside, he's here. And the other kid that was with them, the younger one, looked inside and swore he saw this strange dog looking thing just kind of crouched over doing something in there. And there was all these like chew toys around. Okay. Dogs chew and rip things apart. And a ton of these dogman cases, they're not eating anything. They're literally just shredding it and throwing things around. Recently, there was a case down in Oklahoma with a family that their little girl screamed out that a monster was looking in their room. We have a handprint that pretty much is unverifiable. It is a large, leathery looking handprint on the window where she claims that this thing was looking in. Well, also, some of their farm animals, like goats and things, had been going missing. And recently, one of their favorite goats went missing, so they buried it. Well, something kept putting this thing back in the same position in their yard, just as if to taunt with them. There's been other cases where hunters are out in the middle of nowhere and they're finding like animal body parts thrown all up into the trees, as if basically either to mark their territory or just sheer enjoyment, as if, like, as I said, enjoying shredding people apart. You have the LBL case where the little girl, again, was found up in the tree, disemboweled, pretty much mangled to heck. I have an interesting theory, too, with the Port Chatham and Portlock, Alaska, where a lot of people, say it's Sasquatch and things like that. But if you look at like the historical documents of it, they found large, strange footprints. Well, look at some of the prints I sent you. Those are large, strange footprints too. No one's ever in the term says they directly see an ape-like creature. They said that they saw large hominoid type creatures in the forest. Well, the dogman is also reported to be potentially hominoid. All those bodies were shredded, okay? None of them were preyed on. They were just ripped apart, which previously I was just explaining how when we document things now, things are just shredded like that. Yeah, as far as I know, there's been cases where Bigfoot rip apart a dog if it's chasing them and it's too aggressive. But I don't know of too many cases where they just completely rip the person apart. I think they bang on trees, break down trees, throw rocks at you, basically telling you to get out of there. I think also what happened in Port Chatham is up in that area, you have old reports near the Yukon Territory too of the Audette and all these other large, the saber wolf, basically dogmen versions of it. And there's cave systems up there. There's a ton of areas where something like that could hide. And recently, when they tried to send up an expedition to see if they could re-inhabit the area, they found these strange burrow type areas. Again, that all seems like what I previously stated about potential dogman encounters and dogman activity. So I honestly think some of the traditional, maybe Sasquatch type encounters might be, or what they think is a Sasquatch, might actually be dogmen, because dogmen bang on trees too. I've heard of cases of dogmen leaving like large deer in the middle of the road. So when you get out of your car, because you can't drive over it, they see the thing looking in the bushes at them. I mean, they set traps. They try to draw you outside. They mimic sounds. So a lot of people would automatically assume that that was a Sasquatch. But again, I have cases of dogmen throwing rocks and sticks. So I think sometimes people might think they're running out just after a Bigfoot, but I don't know if that's what you're going out after. And I do think, yeah, sure, if a Sasquatch is a predator, it's going to snag you potentially if it can, but also there's a ton of different variations of Native American lore about how they're the guardians of the forest and that they used to live in peace with us. And I've heard of cases of Sasquatch coming and braiding people's horses and people gifting them and things, and other people saying that they see a soul in the eyes of the Sasquatch when they see them. Yet when people see the dog man, they don't see a soul, that it's just going to take you and eat you. So I don't think that many Sasquatch are responsible for taking people like that. You might have your rogues, but an apex predator, a grizzly bear, a great white shark, okay, they might not potentially be going out of their way to eat you. Okay, but if a grizzly bear is hungry and it's looking for a moose, and you and I walk out into a clearing and it sees us and it's hungry, doesn't mean it was going out of its way to eat a person, but it sees you now. Okay, so any sort of predator that has a chance to take a person is going to take a person. And usually there's remnants of that. There's a struggle. But if something's so dominant that it hits you immediately and then makes it so you can't either speak, like it breaks your neck or something, or your back, and so you no longer can scream for help, and then you're gone like that, what's doing that?
Yeah, indeed. And I've seen forensic photos of big cat attacks and bear attacks and things like that. I mean, there's a lot of left behind. There's blood, body fluids, torn clothing, flesh, things like that. I mean, but these people that disappear completely where there's no trace. I mean, a bear is not going to eat your tennis shoes. They're not going to eat your belt buckle. A big cat's not either. But I think, like you said, whatever it is, it hunts with precision. And when it takes something, it takes it completely. And yeah, people say, that some large predator animals like that will cache their kills in a tree or bury it and come back for it. But again, there's going to be disturbance in the ground cover. There's going to be some forensic evidence left behind. I don't know of any natural predator like that can do that and not leave any trace, no prints, no screams for help, nothing. So there's definitely something out there. And excuse me, in those some of those things that you sent me, something I'd kind of looked at and forgotten about. It seemed like it was almost a flap or a wave there for a while of people that were being attacked by what the authorities are describing as wild dogs. And in fact, there was one lady there that you sent me the article about, elderly lady in coastal North Carolina that was bitten to death by something. They could only from DNA determine that it was canine. Beyond that, they didn't know. I don't buy that. Like you said, they could tell from that DNA what type of canine it was. So this was some sort of unknown canine, allegedly, based on the police reports.
100% again, preach, please, my friend. And kudos. Something took her and something attacked. And I think we're in a time and age now where it's harder to cover things up. Whereas in the past, without technology, the government, if when heard about things like that, could show up at areas and kind of keep it under wraps. But now, like you said, they can put out the article and try to curve the narrative. And unfortunately, the majority of the public, I hate to say this, but they really are eggshell mind in regards of if the government, for example, knew a large meteorite was coming towards Earth, they're not just going to tell the general public this is happening. You know why? Look at the case of War of the Worlds when they read that over the radio. That was entertainment, and people tuned in and thought the world was ending and were killing their families and themselves and just doing crazy acts. Okay. I don't think the majority of people can comprehend things that are outside of simplicity, meaning they want to be told, hey, you got to work 9 to 5, go home, you have a family life. They don't have the means, or they don't care to think outside of the box. So now, though, you have more people that can think outside of the box, that have capabilities to reach with other people and sit down and be like, all right, well, there's a ton of red flags right with this, as you said. Why is this occurring? I mean, just recently in Northern California, I believe it was, they put out a warning about a pack of quote unquote hybrid wolves that were uncatchable, that were killing people's pets and potentially trying to take people. Again, yes, dogs are smart. Any animal is smart. But if a human really wants to catch a pack of wolves, no one can tell me that they couldn't. I mean, it's just the way it is. If someone sat there and scoped out long enough a coyote, a fox, or a wolf, you're going to catch it, are you not? I mean, how do we get videos of them in Yellowstone filming them? I mean, a wolf's smart, but if you put down food, yum, 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 I still need to eat. It's no different than when people relocate raccoons that are smart and they see a buddy of theirs get caught in the trap because he just wanted that marshmallow and cat food. Sometimes a raccoon helps his buddy out and they get out. Other times he does the same dang thing his buddy just did. Now he's trapped. Does that make them stupid? No. Raccoons know how to open doors and things like that. Yet again, a dog man or a canine can be caught, especially a canine like a wolf. So the fact that they're unable to catch these quote unquote hybrid wolves is such a red flag. And then the case you mentioned, and also another case down in Texas where a gentleman had his throat completely ripped out, where they tried to say it was a cougar, but the woman that came in that specialized in that said there's no way it was a cougar because it wouldn't have been able to just swipe his neck out at the angle of how tall he was like that and with that much force. But yet this thing did it in one swipe, and there was no sign of predation as well. And again, what you mentioned about trees, I think a lot of people, we look down when we're in the forest, okay? And plenty of animals, such as mountain lions, ambush from trees. I have cases, so many cases of people seeing dogmen leaping from tree to tree, using trees, jumping on the roof from trees. I've heard cases about Sasquatch doing that as well. There must be so many times when people are out in the forest and we're not looking up and there's something up there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to be hyper vigilant out there. Watch where you step, watch where you put your hand, and look up. And I've tested that theory. I used to do a lot of hiking in the Smokies, and one day, just for the fun of it, just right off the trail, I think I was hiking up to Klingman's Dome that time, and just off the trail, I climbed up a tree, and I just sat up there, and there were probably 3 dozen people that walked just underneath me, right by me, never saw me. And that was just to test a theory that most people don't look up when they're in the forest. But yeah, that's big cats do that. They lay in wait and they jump down and they tend to go for the neck. But again, there's going to be a struggle. There's going to be some signs. You might have time to scream depending on where they got you. But whatever these things are, they're smart. They're intelligent, more so than other animals. And canine, lupine, I mean, it kind of blurs in there in some places, but I think there's something more out there now. If it's of our own creation, if it's some species that we're not aware of. I mean, look at the rainforest. They find hundreds, if not thousands of new species every year down there. Just because we're not aware of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So there's things like that to consider. And then something else I wanted to touch on, the cloaking ability. Now, people talk about Bigfoot being able to do that either at will, kind of like a chameleon. It can vibrate at a higher or lower frequency, and you can't see it, or you can only see an outline of it. And that kind of gets into the predator creature, the glimmer man that people have talked about. Now there's military applications in that supposedly they have that cloaking ability. I've seen some videos and things from the Middle East that claims to be using that. But what if there are natural animals that can do that sort of thing? That would explain why they're never seen. Or comedian Mitch Hedberg once quipped that all the pictures of Bigfoot are blurry because Bigfoot, him or herself, is blurry. So that kind of makes sense. Do you think that these dogmen, do you think they have that ability or stealth? Do they have some sort of cloaking ability, or are they more just ninja-like where they can, walk through the forest and not be seen or heard just because they're so stealthy?
Great question, my friend. I think when it comes to when you tapped on the predator type cloaking, I would say I personally believe that's more of the dark magic and the portal hopping when you've done something sinister. I'm going to give a shout out to Ryan Tremblay, who's a great cryptozoologist, and he really helped me understand, like I said, some of the differences between skinwalkers, wendigos, and dogman. You have to wear the pelt of the animal or what you've done to become that. And you need to do something sinister like kill somebody close to you or yes. So after you've done that and then you wear the pelt of what it is you've killed, you can then become it. Well, what are the odds of a person being able to kill the dogman, quote unquote, to take its pelt? Probably 0 to none, in my opinion. Yet, if they're able to change into these animals, then they can dive into more of the dark magic and hop into portals. And if someone was to ask, well, could a skinwalker, if it did take the form of dogman and wore its pelt, destroy a dogman? Yeah, 100%. We're then talking about something that has the form and power of the dogman, but yet the intelligence and the magic use as a person, where dogmen are smart. But a skinwalker, as I said, is a highly intelligent witch, basically, more or less. So when I approach the cloaking thing, look at any animal for the most part outside. I mean, just look at a cat in tall grass, or let's look at a tiger or a great white shark. I'll start with a shark. Its belly's white, but its top's gray. So from the bottom, when you're looking up with the sun, if you're a sea creature, you don't really see it. And then if you're looking from the top down, it blends in with the water when it comes up and gets you. Well, that's like a form of cloaking right there. Or large cats, when they push themselves down and almost flatten out in the grass or to the ground, you can barely see them. I recently saw a case of a gentleman that was super lucky that as he was coming across some tall grass, well, this cat got excited, this mountain lion, so whipped his tail for a second. It's the only reason he was able to see it, and he stopped and then focused in and realized there was a mountain lion there. Previous to that, though, he didn't see it at all. So I think just like with a large tiger or anything like that, if you and I are walking out in India and we see a tiger like that, hate to break it to anybody, the time you usually see an apex predator, you're toast most of the time. I mean, that's why they wear masks on the back of their head, to try to make it look like you're looking at the predator, because most predators are hypochondriacs, meaning they're afraid to be injured and they can't afford to be injured if they're solo hunters for sure. So they are opportunistic still, meaning even though a tiger could just take you on very easily, it still needs to worry about being hurt. So if it's attacking you from behind and you're not looking, huge advantage. But that mask still happens to them, but in theory, it's supposed to help deter the tiger. Same thing with great white sharks. They always attack from the back and the bottom. I mean, unless it's like a big bully bear that just doesn't even care, but it's still same thing. A bear is stealthy as hell too if it wants to before it bursts out of the forest. I definitely think dogmen are just stealthy and cloaking in regards of just blending in with their environment. I mean, we don't have the best eyesight compared to animals. So I mean, when we're scanning the forest, our mind's trying to process all that. How many times are just a general bird hiding? How many times is a squirrel just sitting there looking at you that we don't pick up on? Yeah. So I mean, if those type of animals or chameleons or spiders can blend in with foliage, I mean, look how many times spiders have bright colors and it looks like they're in with flowers, but yet their legs move and you're like, oh wow, it's a crazy spider. The crab spiders, etc. I just think, yes, the portal hopping and things like that would be more the hellhounds, the skinwalking type aspects. But I think the dogman is just remnant of some of those ancestral aspects I mentioned. I just think they're good hunters, and any apex predator blends in. Look how big a grizzly bear is. You know how many times I've heard stories about them sneaking up on people and just blending straight in with the grass, and it's a massive bear.
Yeah, and I think that can be sometimes a part of it is a misidentified creature. I was up in Washington State, somewhere around the Gifford Pinchot National Forest. I was in up there, and I saw the weirdest looking thing I'd ever seen. So I turned around to go back and take a look at it, and it was turned out it was some type of elk, but it had the mange or something. It didn't have any hair on it, or very little hair. But if I just glanced at that and didn't go back to see what it was, I would have thought I encountered some kind of cryptid or some kind of nightmare creature. But it was just, an elk that had a skin condition or a problem there with its pelt. But then there's a lot of things where you have these eyewitness sightings where, there's no doubt, no, it was a dog. It was walking on two legs. It was built like a very muscular man, but it had the head of a dog, and it was pissed off. So I didn't stick around. That's something different. I don't think that's going to be a misidentification. And like the cases we're talking about where the kid said, "Oh, the bear kept me safe and cuddled with me and stuff," and then the authorities like, "Okay, it was a bear, nothing to see. Everybody go home." I think those need to be delved into more. Like, you and I know that a bear isn't going to cuddle a child and pick berries and feed to it. Like you said, I think it was something that was maybe Hansel and Gretel. That was a good analogy there. That it's here, I'm going to fill you full of berries before I eat you. Maybe something like that. But again, that's not a bear. That's not bear behavior.
Not as far as I know, exactly. And when I try to approach this, that's why I always use the word potential. 100% I know people are vanishing, as I showed you in that map. 100% I know the cave systems that they show. And 100% I know people are claiming to have encounters with an upright dogman canine creature. And that all matches up. Again, I use the word potential because I am a healthy skeptic when I approach this topic. Okay. I have never had any sort of paranormal encounters myself. I've never had any of that. All I know is people ranging back from 290 BC that are historical people that didn't have time to tell quote unquote fairy tales report seeing something. And now fast forward to a few days ago, fielding something from a person that I respect and again has nothing to gain from what it is they reported to me. So again, I've never seen anything myself. I can't tell anyone I've seen something like that because I haven't. But I do know, as I just stated, there are so many reports. I'm working on a book and it's around 528 pages right now of encounters and interactions with what people claim is a dog man. I step back though, and I have to subjectively and objectively approach that, meaning some people are misidentifying things, as you stated. A bear or any sort of animal with a disease or mange is going to look very strange. And also, again, I really hate to say it, but we as humans try to understand everything. Yet in fear, things are exaggerated, meaning in previous times when we had to worry about apex predators all the time, that whole fear aspect was what would save your life. But now, today, when we hype ourselves all up and we go into areas and we're already nervous and then we get super more nervous because we're thinking about the story or encounter that we just heard, and then the tree stump or the shadows in the forest all of a sudden look like a Sasquatch or a dog man. People need to understand that unfortunately our mind is prefabricating some of that. It's no different than, say, if you and I had a cool memory 20 years ago, right? And then we sit down and we talk about it. Yeah, hey, sounds all the same. But if someone was able to pull us each back to that memory, we each told it a little bit different in regards of how it really happened, just because your mind's plugging in pieces, because over time we forget things. I think some of the potential exaggerations too come in when someone says, oh, this was a 12 to 15 foot being or whatever. Man, people again are horrible at describing things we see. How many times have there been assumptions of a Loch Ness monster or an unknown sea being or cryptid, yet there's no sort of anything to depict the size range. And someone's like, oh, wow, it was like 20 to 30 feet. But then someone that was able to break down the waves and the current and actually see the size of the thing was like, no, it's not even close to that. Or someone sees a shark. Oh, man, that thing was like 18 feet, or maybe it was like 13. That's still a big shark. But again, when fear or things are unfolding in the moment, we're not the best at understanding what's occurring. We're trying to understand. So we're like, oh wow, it's like 15 feet tall, and you're panicking. But in actuality, it's probably not that. Or it's no different than, say, if a decent sized rat ran at us out of nowhere. We'd be like, oh my goodness, that thing's huge. But it would terrify most people. You just jump up on your bed. But actually, if someone that wasn't really afraid of the rat picked it up for a second and looked at it, probably might not be that huge of a rat into comparison to what we just thought we saw. So I try to approach it like that. But then there are ones that really stump you, where you have people that are really specialized in things, and people that are bear experts or bear hunters or bear trackers, people that aren't really afraid of predators, which is why they do what it is they do. And they're very well rounded with what it is they know that they saw, like our tracker, Nuxium, as well. They know animals, and now they're seeing something that they can't describe. When, if they're able to tell me that's a blue herring track in the snow when I think it looks like it's something crazy, well, that tells me obviously they're very educated in what they do. And then I don't know if you've ever heard of Bart Schleiser in the Yukon Territory, that gentleman that pretty much was arguably the best survivalist that no one ever has even heard of. He specialized in tracking down large predators and putting collars on them, like grizzly bears in Yellowstone National Park. I believe he also, I think it was Russia, he went to Siberia. Yeah, it was a Siberian tiger, where he went over to try to help them as well. And he had pictures of himself in the den playing with the Siberian tiger cubs while the mother was out doing what it was she was doing. Okay, so this man specialized in sneaking up on predators. They didn't sneak up on him, he snuck up on them. Well, the dude goes hiking / hunting in a very remote part of the Yukon Territory, just disappears. Okay, his campsite has plenty of food. His friends end up going back after the Royal Mounted Police tried to tell them that he must have been attacked by wolves in the area, because the scat and things showed that there was no signs of human predation from bears or wolves in the area. So his friends went back. They found an inflatable raft further down the river. And then they ended up finding an area where his bow and arrow was sitting up, leaned up against a tree. You could see where he was sitting down on his backpack. There was an impression of it where he was waiting for something, just enjoying his day. I don't know. And that's it. There was no sign of him. All else they found was a piece of shredded, bloody clothing, his goggles that had some blood splatter on it, and a small couple pieces of vertebrae. That's it. What apex predator in that area could have done that to this guy when he, again, was tracking tigers and bears? People can say, hey, maybe he had a seizure or some sort of health issue, but at that point in time, he was relatively young and was in great health. But again, sure, those type of things occur. But why didn't anything go back to his campsite when it was stocked with food? Why did those quote unquote bears and wolves not go to his cache of food? If they're hungry, would they not just ransack your campsite? Again, what happened to that guy?
Yeah, I agree. That was a weird one. I've covered that case in the past, and none of it made any sense. Again, like you said, here was a guy that snuck up on animals, and I'm not going to believe for a minute that he let his guard down enough for an animal to sneak up on him. Although, it's not outside the realm of possibility. We talked about that earlier, that a lot of times people that go missing, it's not due to anything mysterious or spooky. It's being either ill-prepared or overconfident. So maybe he was overconfident. But, that's pretty ballsy to get in the den and play with the cubs when the mother's not there, because any kind of animal mother will just tear the crap out of you if you get between, that or cubs or kittens or whatever. Bears, for example, people in the Smokies have been mauled, trying to get a selfie with a bear or just take pictures of the bears. But if you get between a mother and her cubs, there's going to be trouble. So yeah, that's another one of those. It's just so weird that I don't have any explanation for it other than they don't know what happened. That's my reasoning. I don't know. And something else they touched on was the portal theory. Now you hear a lot about that in connection with disappearances and with sightings of creatures and things. They'll hear like maybe a loud popping noise or something and see. In the early days of the Skinwalker Ranch, the original couple that lived there, their name escapes me right now. The lady was standing at the sink one morning doing dishes. She sees what she describes as a portal open up, and a two-legged dog-looking creature walks out of it, stomps off stage left or whatever, and the portal closes back. But same lady, another time, saw what she described as a portal open up, and there's a man sitting at a desk doing something, looks up at her, seems kind of annoyed, messes with something on the desk, and then the portal closes back. So what is that? Is that some kind of government thing? And I've covered missing person cases where they were hiking on a trail and suddenly realize they're not on the trail anymore. They look back behind them, can't see where they've ever been on a trail. They're someplace different, someplace other than where they think they are, where they should be. And then there are cases where people have been able to hear and see search and rescue, but they can't be seen or heard. So there's some kind of strangeness with all that too. There's something out there, portal wise. What are your thoughts on portals in general, or as it relates to Dogman and other cryptids?
You were spot on. I mean, there's proven documentation of the military being able to, I can't remember what naval ship it was, but they were able to move it to a different location with potential.
The Philadelphia experiment, I think, is the one you referred
Yes.
to there. Yeah.
So we have that right there. So if they're able to do that, then sure. I mean, I don't see why not. They couldn't potentially open up an area like that if they knew that a certain spot had more electronic or magnetic pull to allow that to occur. I mean, yeah, that could make plenty of quality sense. And there's been some interesting cases where people have heard basically like what sounds like chains or maybe like a whistle in a Dogman case where, yeah, that could be like the government either letting them quote unquote off the chain, no pun intended, or whistling them back to be like, hey, you're done with what it is you're needing to do. But I do know that Jody Cook and the North American Dogman Project, we do break it down into three potential sectors of paranormal, living, and then UFO or extraterrestrial. And when you do say that, though, it is intriguing to me because if you look at the star system and Sirius, right, and the Canis Major, it's a dog, okay? And there are potential people that think this creature could come from that star system. That is way out of my realm, but it's an interesting topic. And also then you have, Anubis with the Egyptians, which is also super interesting. And that he could have been a cynocephaly that proved his worth to the Egyptians, and they actually viewed him as a god because he was an canine cryptid that was super smart, or maybe did he come from another potential solar system? So that's intriguing as heck, and I wish I had a better answer on that in regards of what's occurring. Yeah, as I stated, we have it into those three categories, and there's really merit for all the categories. As I stated earlier about seeing them eating and drinking, yet you just informed me of the portals of right in front of her eyes. She sees this canine cryptid type creature come out. Okay. And that's how I try to approach that is I welcome everything. And I really enjoy being informed about things like that because my job as a journalist and historian is just to figure out what's going on. I don't have, what's the term? I don't have money or a soldier in the fight, whatever you want to say in regards. I don't have my own evidence or any of that. I don't, hoaxers that are trying to hoax things have a person in the fight. Okay. I'm just trying to spread information and historical aspects as to what's occurring. And I do know, again, there's paranormal evidence as to what's happening potentially. So I have to step back and be like, all right, what is happening here? So now, is it paranormal more or is it supernatural? I welcome all that. And I really loathe when people are unable to just sit down and have a cordial conversation like that, because I don't think we're ever going to get the proper answers unless we're able to. If someone has more merit as to potentially why this could be supernatural, let's sit down and talk about that. I enjoy when people come and debunk things for myself and the North American Dogman Project. If you guys can show, or anyone, if a person can show things like that and help us, that's amazing. Okay, I don't get upset about that. I don't go to bed at night all upset that someone went into our potential dogman evidence file and was able to show us why it's a known track, or why it's not a, why it needs to be debunked. That's awesome. I encourage all that and I welcome that. I approach this with such a open mind in regards as to what's occurring, but I also try to scientifically approach it. And I am a man of science, meaning I understand science can be altered in regards of what they're telling you. But when I say I'm a man of science, I mean, I know dinosaurs existed because there's bones, there's skin imprints on rock, there's tracks. I know sharks exist because I can see them. I can see footage of them. I know my dinner tonight is real because I cooked it, I touched it, I'm eating it, I'm tasting it. I know my pet squirrel is real because I can see her. So when I approach things, like I said, I'm scientific, okay? Not saying just because I've never experienced it that those type of things don't occur, but I feel like there's always potentially an answer for something. And if there isn't, then it's really intriguing and it needs to be looked at differently. But meaning, there's known reasons why cell phones and electronics die. There's electronic and magnetic poles that are naturally occurring that will cause those things. So there's times where people can think, oh, my phone got zapped. You might have just stepped into a natural magnetic field. I mean, the whole earth is like a conveyor belt when the elements and the tectonic plates are moving. That all causes friction and electricity type outputs. Those things mess with electronics. It doesn't necessarily mean you were zapped. Someone could have been, though. I wasn't there. I don't know. But I just try to approach it like that and try to understand that there are real answers for things that do occur sometimes. So just because someone gets a heat signature on a tree, trees can still have like heat signatures from the day when they gained sun. Okay, if the sun was hitting on a spot of a tree throughout the day, that heat is caught up in that wood. Or if a small raccoon was sitting on that, that's going to be a heat signature. So just because someone gets a heat signature from a tree doesn't mean a massive cryptid is sitting there right now, or it was there. Could it be? Sure. But that's what I mean about how I try to approach it and understand, well, what caused that? I'm a huge fan of Les Stroud, and I love how he approaches the Sasquatch thing. When I was watching that, he's spot on. He's walking down a pretty isolated road, looks up, sees a bunch of broken down branches and trees snaps. Strange, he stops for a second. He's looking, trying to understand and comprehend what occurs. Then he presents a perfect theory that, well, it probably did occur like this. A person was driving their truck, a logger potentially, and around the curve right there was a muddy type area. And like he said, this truck probably took a wide turn, lost its control for a second, swerved back in, busted down those trees, continued down the road. Okay, but then there's other times where he was like, wow, I can't really explain that. This is intriguing. Does it 100% mean it's Sasquatch or Bigfoot? No, but can I explain it? No. And so that's really how I try to approach that. And that's why I use the term potential, because I'm not going to sit here and force feed anybody and say I can guarantee and prove that this canine creature is existing. No, but I can show you that there's reports, there's people missing, there's unknown canine DNA, there's unknown strange footprints. I can show you all that stuff. And if people want to brush me aside, that's okay. You're right. I'm just a journalist. I'm just a historian, and I'm a graphics designer and videographer. That's okay. Well, talk to my tracker. You can't really brush him aside. Talk to our environmentalist. You can't really brush her aside, because now these people actually have some scientific merit. They have degrees to show for it. So if people want to be so shallow just because I don't have that, that's okay. I'm not offended by any of that, because my goal again is just to bring together quality knowledge, share it with people such as yourself, and try to figure out what's going on, and make it easily accessible, and filter through the crap, the creepy pastas that people are saying are true and stuff. That's cool if someone wants to tell a creepy pasta, but state that, okay? Like don't tell your crazy werewolf dogman encounter that sounds like a Hollywood movie as it really occurring, if it didn't, because the majority of dogman encounters that we have documented are more simplistic in regards of them running across the road, or yeah, trying to open your car door, but it's not like these crazy stories. Sure, we've been able to verify, as far as we know, a couple of those, but I think that's a huge problem, is people claim we want the answers for things, right? But at the end of the day, it just seems like everyone likes a good story, man.
Yeah, indeed. And unfortunately, you do have people out there in the communities that's that way, in the UFO community, and the Bigfoot community, and the Dogman community, and any paranormal, supernatural things. Yeah, people that just tell stories because people want to be entertained. They want to hear those stories. But again, yeah, put a disclaimer or something on there. This is just a story. Maybe it's based on a true event or something like that. But I know of a person. I won't name any names here, but he went to one of the conferences. I won't even say which cryptid it was, but he was a specific cryptid conference. Guy shows up and almost got his ass handed to him because he's just making up stories and putting it out there as evidence. And I've heard other people claim that they could take, say, one actual report and then change the names, the location, change it up a little bit, and make 6 out of it. See, that's a disservice to the people like you that are actually out there, boots on the ground or nose in books and old newspapers and things, studying these accounts. Anybody could make up a story. And sure, that's going to happen with anything. But, let people know that this is based on something, or this really happened. There's a huge difference there. And as far as science, I mean, that is the best way to measure anything. Now, those are our ways of measuring things. But like I said, mentioned earlier, my dad was a scientist at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and he would talk about sometimes in a laboratory under extremely controlled conditions, they would have anomalous results. It wasn't supposed to happen. It couldn't happen, yet it did happen, and they couldn't get it to happen again. So things like that occur just in nature. And now I'm not saying that's an explanation for cryptids and things, but it goes to show that there is nothing that's 100% foolproof or perfect in any type of measurement. Anything. I mean, certain things, yeah, but again, I don't know. There's something strange out there. There's been too many eyewitness reports and encounters and things. And again, as you mentioned earlier, humans, we make very poor witnesses for firsthand encounters and stuff. When I was doing my pre-law at the University of Tennessee, we were sitting in a lecture class one day. A guy comes running in one of the side doors, grabs a girl's purse off her desk, and runs out the other door. And people start to get up, and the professor's like, no, just remain still. And he goes up to the board and says, now we're going to describe who this was so we can tell the campus police who to look for. And everybody saw something different. And then he would put leading things in there. Well, what color scarf was he wearing? Well, one girl said, oh, it was a black scarf. Another girl said, no, it was a plaid scarf. What kind of glasses was he wearing? All these things. And then eventually the guy comes back in, hands the girl his purse. The professor had put him up to it just to give an example of how poor eyewitness descriptions are. People that claimed he was wearing a certain type of glasses, he wasn't wearing any glasses. The scarf, that was put into their heads by the professor. He wasn't wearing a scarf. And nobody got it right. I mean, there were some that had certain portions of it correct, but nobody actually described what the guy looked like to the point that you could have done like a sketch or something of him and find the right guy. So our minds are faulty. The pareidolia, where we see things, where I've had people show me pictures that they've taken in the woods and say, see, that's a Bigfoot right there. And I'm like, I don't see anything. It's no different than, laying on your back and looking up at the clouds, and you can see a castle or a dragon or a pony or something. Your mind is wired that way to want to make sense of things that don't make any sense. And I think that can account for things. But the obverse of that, playing devil's advocate here, there's been too many examples of things that people have seen, whether it be, the Mothman. No, that wasn't a sandhill crane. Or a bear. Maybe I've seen pictures of bear that have the mange. They're frightening looking, but nobody's going to mistake that for something other than a bear with a problem. Maybe. I mean, again, and you talked about that when fear will increase the size of things. I've experienced that myself. When you're in that fight or flight mode that's just bred into us, you can see things and think things are one way when they're not like that at all. Yeah, a snake, when you come across it in the woods, oh, that thing was huge. And then when you see it again, oh, well, it's not really that big, but it looked big. Just as we're poor estimators, of the size, shape, height, speed, things like that. Even UFO encounters, oh, it had to be, under 1,000 feet. Well, again, how good of a judge are you at height and altitude and things like that? So, but now you touched on Anubis. I find those cases particularly strange. A friend of mine, she lives in Louisiana. I can't think of her name right now, but her account was in one of Linda Godfrey's books, and she saw in somewhere in the swamps down in Louisiana, she saw a dogman creature, but she said it had a head like Anubis, just like in the Egyptian paintings and stuff. So again, just like there's different breeds of dog, I think there's in sizes and everything. I think there's differences in dogman like that. Same with Bigfoot. I think some of them are bigger than others, so they have different hair and so on. And I would imagine that would be true with dogman too. Just because this dogman looks like this and does this doesn't mean every dogman looks like that and does that. The difference between a German Shepherd and say a Beagle, they're both dogs, but they're both canine. Let's say it that way. But I think there's all kinds of differences out there.
First, I would just like to say thank you for the kind words. I appreciate all that. And no, again, you tap right on the head of the nail right there. And when I try to approach the dogman, that's just a loose term in regards of what people have decided to dub it. So it's kind of like a triangle for me, meaning you have Bear Man, Bearzilla, you have Dogman, you have Coyote Man, you have your Klickitat Ape Cat, you have your hyena type 3 looking dogman, you have your German Shepherd husky looking ones, you have some that look like jackals, you have some that have been reported to be looking like foxes. So when I use the term dogman, and I have reports of all those, ranging also red eyes, yellow eyes, green eyes, and a ton of different colorings. So I think a lot of people, I guess, get that immediate misconception of when someone says the term dogman of it just being the traditional type 1 werewolf looking from The Howling, or the gray one in Van Helsing, or the black one. And yeah, the majority of dogman reports are like that, but yet there are also a decent amount of the other versions, as I just stated, that look like that. And it's no different than just subspecies of cats or canines, like you said, that have different variations but are still potentially from a similar bloodline. And I wanted to touch base on the anomaly aspect. Like you said, I do know recently they found a couple, or don't even know if I want to use the word couple, maybe one grizzly bear that had mated with a polar bear. That was the first time they had ever come across that. And that potentially is something that's not the norm, but could start a new bloodline. I mean, look at donkeys, mules. They are, off breeds. And also, I think they're reintroducing a certain type of, it was like a zebra, but it wasn't fully a zebra, that they are being able to mate it with something else to make that version of the zebra. And I did see something super interesting too about how they believe woolly mammoths, when they became dwarfs and stuff, they basically bred themselves to death because they said their DNA was so screwed up from potential inbreeding and things like that, and which is why they were almost super unhealthy. So nature shows examples of that for good and bad, where things either become kind of like a new species or a subvariant of it. Because I mean, a polar bear, grizzly bear is not technically a new species. It's a bear, but it's a new subvariant of that bear now. So that's definitely something that needs to be, as you stated, understood for sure. But there's definitely more to it than that. And I mean, you've been investigating this topic, the missing person topic, for quite a long time. Honestly, I believe yourself. I mean, I think I heard of you before I heard of David Paulides, or it might have been right around the same time where I heard of both of y'all, but I listened to you way more than him. I understood what he was about, but you two were the ones that pretty much got me to understand what was occurring in regards of people missing. And then when I was given an opportunity because of some of the historical documentation I had gathered and just in my brain with, potential dogman stuff that was just outside of the realm of explanation, I then was able to sit down and look at our documents and our database and then look back at known information and known cases that potentially you had mentioned and other people had, shown people going missing here. And I was like, wait a second, okay, boom, 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 let's sandwich this together. It almost matches up perfectly. So I was like, okay, I need to reach out to Steve and hopefully he has a second to sit down and just potentially give me his thoughts on this. I mean, because as I said, we have all this potential eerie evidence stating that something animal, not human, is taking people in these areas, and it matches up with a ton of the research that you've put out there. So I guess what's your thought about all that?
Well, again, like I said, not all these cases can be misadventure or being ill-equipped and ill-prepared. A lot of them are, and a lot of stuff isn't that mysterious. But then a lot of it is. It's just like these things we were talking about here. It's not a one size fits all. Your mileage may vary every case is unique in some regards. But there's something out there. And then you mentioned about the caving systems. I've seen those maps where if you overlay, where you have these clusters of missing people with a map of the cave systems, they line up. I think there's something. It has something to do with the caves. I don't know. In the example you gave, there could be some sort of hyena type hybrid that lives in these caves. But then also, there's stories of people that some sort of mimic tried to lure them into a cave. They would hear a voice coming out of the cave, maybe even what sounded like a voice of somebody they knew, a loved one that was either still alive and halfway across the country, or even somebody that had passed on. And one gentleman said he heard himself calling to himself from a cave. So that's something that's a supernatural quality there. If it knows you well enough that it can read your mind to know what your mother sounded like, or to know what your brother sounds like, or something to try to get you to come into this cave. But I'm here to tell you, if I'm out in the woods and I hear something calling me into a cave, I'm going to go the other direction just as fast as I can go. That's not natural. That's supernatural. And now, as far as animal noises and things like that, there are big cats that make a noise sometimes that sounds like a person screaming or a baby crying. That's one thing. I could see a mistake in that. But in regards to something calling your name, but again, could that be misheard? That sounded like it said my name. Maybe it didn't say my name at all, but it's not something I would bet on. And again, when you're talking about the hybrids there, I look at the case of the liger or the tigon, which is the liger is, I believe it's a male lion and a female tiger, and a tigon is just the opposite of that. They're the same genus, but of different species. But they have characteristics of both and tend to be larger than either their parent species. So that's where you get that, that blending of two different types that are similar, and it makes like a super animal. I could see that in some regards. It's like Charles Fort once wrote, one measures a circle beginning anywhere, but you come right back around full circle. But I think it's all connected, and there are no right or wrong answers. And like I said, I gave up looking for the answers years ago. I'm on to the next set of questions. And best way I've ever heard it put, Soraya Askath from Where Did the Road Go? I was on his show one time. He's on, I can't remember the name of the station. It's at Cornell University in New York. But he said it's looking into these things, whether it be the paranormal or cryptids or UFOs or anything. It's like you're trying to put a jigsaw puzzle together without having the cover to look at the picture to see what picture you're trying to even make when you put these pieces together. And then the farther you get into it, you realize that some joker has mixed maybe a dozen puzzles together. So some of the pieces don't fit anywhere on the particular puzzle that you're trying to solve. And I thought that was just a brilliant analogy. There are some things that just, and you can't factor an unknown, but we're definitely dealing with some unknowns here.
That's some nightmare fuel right there for sure. And no, I preach 100% agree with that. And to touch on some of the creepy voices, I actually feel that the case when some of the northern fires in California were raging, they called in some of, I believe it was the Army reserves to help out with that, or it actually might have been a sector of the military that was active that just wasn't deployed at that point in time, but they were fighting the forest fires, and they said they had set up a generator in an area with a large light, and a group of them just parked their Humvees and they were just figuring out, what's the next direction they needed to go to deal with the potential fire or where it was heading. And they began to hear voices that sounded like them calling to them from the forest, and that they saw a large, strange bipedal wolf-like creature, which would potentially be the skinwalker, I guess, like I was meaning, or the dark magic aspect. And they were like, what the heck? And they ended up fleeing the area. And that's what I try to tell people as well too. Man, so many people try to flex with TikTok and stuff like that, and just these paranormal encounters. At the end of the day, you said it best a second ago, and I've preached it so many times. Okay, when you're out in the wild and a predator is coming towards you, any bozo that pulls their phone out and tries to record it is dead. I mean, the grizzly bear is not going to sit there and pose for the photo. It's going to run you over, shred you. Good night. Okay, so yeah, show me how many times people are recording that. Every once in a while, you have somebody that got lucky that the person behind them had a gun or something, or the bear decided it was just going to bluff charge you, which you got a few of those. But if you're out there and some crazy unknown or massive wolf is running at you, I'm not pulling my phone out and recording a pack of wolves running towards me. Are you kidding me? Like you said, I'm turning and going the other ways. And again, the average person that's out there that could just be hiking with their family or enjoying the day isn't carrying casting material around in their bag, or they might not even have their phone on them because they maybe might be out there to get away from that. Okay. They might have a satellite phone that they can turn on for help. So they come across some strange tracks. Well, they don't have a way to cast them or take pictures. So they tell you they saw them. Okay. Or people are like, well, what about all the hunters out there? I'm not a hunter, so I can't answer for them. But as far as I know, if a person is out there hunting, I don't think they're on their cell phone texting. They're probably tracking whatever it is that they're after. Okay. So again, if you have a rifle or your weapon in your hand and you pull it up and you have a scope and you're looking at this unknown creature that then turns at you and growls or starts running towards you, are you going to lower your weapon to pull up your cell phone now and open up after you put your passcode in or your face recognition? Then you're just going to record this video, or you're just going to open up TikTok and record it? Get out of here with that stuff. And like, that's like such an issue, because people take it as that's real when you can blatantly see that this person was in a suit. I mean, look at the Gable film. How many times has that been debunked that guy was in a ghillie suit, and you can see the mask when it comes up to the camera. You can see the area where the person bought the old property with all that stuff. He says he thought it was cool, which is why he made it. He made a part 2. Like, why are people still trying to come at me, be like, oh, well, the Gable film, check that out? It's like, no, that's fake. That's been debunked. Like when I was in high school watching Monster Quest, like that was debunked. Like what are we doing here right now? Like, why is that still a real question that I need to answer? Which I'm okay to answer anything, but why are people asking me that still? Haven't we put that to rest yet? And that just shows me that all the mixed information that's out there, which is why it's super important to try to make sure I align myself with quality individuals such as yourself that are actually putting out information that can be beneficial and figuring out what's occurring. And it's also why people don't necessarily like maybe myself or the North American Dogman Project, is because we're not here to pump up fake stories and make Hollywood movies. We're here to figure out what's occurring, debunk things, bring clarity to things, and present evidence. That's it. And people that are going to get offended by that are people that are hoaxing. Okay. Like those are the people that are going to be upset that their photo has been debunked. And that's why I don't really look at New Age encounters necessarily with as much merit and credibility as I do some of the older ones. I mean, when you dig back in history, like during the witch trials and the werewolf trials, you have these people that, you know, were reporting seeing these things. Think about what was at risk with that. Okay. There's an example of an archer that went out with a group of peasants that was sent out to find a 15-year-old boy. Okay, he comes across the boy. He's twitching. He's dead. He's freshly killed. These two large, black, massive wolves with glowing eyes bust out of the brush, right? Knock him over, scare the peasants. Okay, this guy's got to go back to the town now. And this is the time frame where they're, like, I don't even know how to word this, disposing of people, there we go, in inhumane ways for supposedly being witches and werewolves. This guy's got to go back to the town, tell them, hey, we found the 15-year-old boy, but he's dead, so I don't have him. And I was attacked or barreled over by two enormous wolves with glowing eyes. I mean, for him to even say that back then, he could have been looked upon as a heretic, all kinds of things, as insane. So when you look at some of those older encounters, yes, I understand. Again, at that point in time, people are trying to understand things. So just because it's dark outside and you hear a strange noise in the forest, you think it's a demon. I understand that. But also on the aspect that I just mentioned, just for that archer to tell that village of people or the king or whatever, whoever sent them out, that this happened, wouldn't that be a weird thing to make up? Wouldn't you just maybe say, hey, I didn't find anybody, or a bear ate them or something? Why the heck would you say that?
Yeah, I agree. That would serve no purpose. And there's a lot of stories like that where it's obvious that the people encountered something and they believe what they saw. I've had experiences. I've got a book full of them, My Strange World, that are my own personal experiences. But, you know, I didn't write that wanting to gain any fame or infamy, as it were. That was just, you know, I was there. This is what happened. And there are people like that, say, like in the UFO community, somebody like Travis Walton. I've heard him speak, and I believe in my heart of hearts that he believes the story that he tells, and it's accurate to the best that he can describe. And then, yeah, you get people that try to do things for show or that are attention seeking, but there's usually a lot of red flags and things on those. And again, people are gullible. You mentioned, you know, TikTok, and they want everything, you know, in bite-sized bits and pieces. And I don't work that way. I had somebody criticize me one day because I had like a 25-second intro for one of my videos. You know, I'm setting it up. You know, I'm saying, welcome to the video. This video, we're going to talk about this or do this, and then I go into the cases. You know, if your attention span is that short that you can't sit through a 25-second intro, then go over to TikTok and just scroll till your eyeballs wear out. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I've got a presence over there. I do some short, like listener stories type thing, and that's another thing that I enjoy. I enjoy hearing people's encounters, and I don't vet them. I take everything at face value. Now, there's been some that were obviously just made up to see. You know, let's see if we can get Steve Stockton to read this. And I passed on those. But for the most part, you know, I like to tell people's encounters. And that I found that emboldens other people. Like in some of my books, people said, you know, I had a very similar experience. And to read it in your book or to hear you tell it and talk about it or relate somebody else's experience, that gave me the ability to come forward and talk about this. And that's what it's all about. You know, it's sharing these experiences and trying to make some sense out of it or not, but just to put them out there to where, you know, because I've had people talk to me and say, you know, I've never told my friends this. I've never told my family this. I've got book stories in Strange Things in the Woods that were told to me that one elderly gentleman was telling me, and his wife was there, and she's like, you never told me that. And he's like, I didn't want you to think I was crazy. Mm-hmm. So I like opening people up to share like that. And in that book in particular, about 95% of the people that I collected those stories encounters from, they've passed on. Those stories would have died with them, especially if they'd never told anybody. So I like being able to create that legacy for people that have had any kind of experience out of the unusual. And there's so much stuff out there that we don't understand that there may not be a scientific or logical explanation for. Same with the missing people. So the Dennis Martin case, I've been looking into these since 1969. I didn't write books about it until later on, but a lot of those in the Smokies, I've been criticized. Oh, that's so-and-so's case. You can't talk about that. Really? I lived the Dennis Martin case when I was a kid. That was like a loss of innocence for me, realizing a kid just like me about my age can disappear and never be found, no trace of him. The Trini Gibson disappearance. I didn't really know her personally, but my parents liked to eat at the cafeteria that she worked at in West Town Mall. I've seen her. She's carried our food to the table before. I knew her sister. I talked with her sister before she drank herself to death. Thelma Pauline Martin that went missing in the Smokies. The hiking and skiing club that I was a part of was part of the search and rescue volunteers. Oh, but you can't talk about that because that's so-and-so's cases. No, if those cases belong to anybody, it's the missing persons themselves. And that's a mantle that I've assumed to keep their names and keep their faces out there. In some of these cases, somebody does know something. And whether it's something that'll jog their memory or a deathbed confession, if it was something nefarious, I don't want to forget the missing. That's just been laid on my heart. And I always say, if I can bring one person home, or in the worst case scenario, give one family closure, that's what I feel led to do. Now, I do enjoy the supernatural and the unusual and the paranormal, all of it. But, the missing people, my hearts go out to those people. I remember, I think it was probably the 40th anniversary of the Dennis Martin disappearance. They interviewed his dad, and I met his dad under separate circumstances. But this interview, they were talking to him, and he wasn't one to talk to the press. He felt like the FBI and the press both did him dirty. But he had agreed to this interview, and he was sitting there, and he said, I always thought one day there would be a knock at the door, and I'd go to the door, and there'd be a well-dressed young man standing there. You think, oh boy, another reporter. Okay, I'll talk to him. Open the door. Yes, can I help you? And this nice dressed young man would say, Dad, it's me. It's Dennis. I've come home. And that just, tore my heart out. And that never happened. He died on Halloween. I don't remember what year it was, several years ago, which was also my birthday, by the way. But, he never had that closure. At least people that are missing, if they are found, even deceased, you've got a grave that you can visit, or you've got the ashes in an urn on the mantle, or however you want to remember that person. But if they never find a body, if you never know, especially for a parent, I mean, for any family member, but especially for a parent, that's got to be just, unbelievable, because you can't even begin the grieving process if you don't know, because you're going to hold on to that hope that, well, they're somewhere out there. But then, you're thinking, are they hurt? Are they injured? Do they know who they are? Are they being held captive? Your mind could go so many different directions. So that's really my mission statement, if I had one, is bring them home or give the family closure.
Preach, man, because that's all great stuff. And I think that's a huge, huge issue. And I'm going to touch on that right there as well, because it's nobody's research. It shouldn't be approached like that, meaning there's a difference. Okay. There's a difference if somebody, say you went out and you had your encounter and somebody takes that as their encounter now, or claims that a member of your organization or our organization took that encounter when somebody else did. Okay, that's not how it needs to be approached. If quote unquote, I'll use myself for example, if someone wants to say, oh, you're taking other people's research. Okay, so I'm taking Alexander the Great and Herodotus's research. I'm pretty sure I heard about it through somebody else. So wait, did you take their research? Because I don't think you sat down at a table and got the permission by either one of them to document their story. Yeah, if everyone approached it like that, no one would hear the topic. Same thing with, rest in peace, Linda Godfrey. she's a legend. Okay. By taking what she built and being able to build more off of that and actually dive into the research that she poured hard time into, that's how you keep that alive. Same thing with Jody Cook. Okay. I, in my book, have things documented from all kinds of different individuals. Why? To present it as, look, these are all credible, documented, meritable cases from people that have credit and merit. And you build off of that. And that's how you figure out things. And if people are so willing to quote unquote hide things all the time and, oh, you can't use my research. Well, that's not how people are ever going to figure out something. And also to touch base on what you said about people looking at people that are crazy, pretty much anybody that's ever had a great idea, whether it's Tesla or anybody else you can think of that had a massive idea about being great or stepping outside of the box and doing something different, has been called crazy. And but yet they achieved greatness. So I usually find that amusing, because the people that tend to call people with interesting concepts and ideas crazy are the ones that are just too simplistic to understand it. So they think you're crazy. It's like when people try to, again, it's out of my realm, but it's just in my eyes, common sense. When they try to say there's no sort of extraterrestrial life. Okay. So there's a massive universe out there, right? Okay. And someone's going to look me in the eyes and honestly say that we're the best that's out there. We're the best that anything could create. There's no sort of any other intellectual life in this massive universe. That's the most close-minded, narcissistic way to approach it, to think that we're the only things that exist. But it is a human way to approach things. I mean, we're the only animal that thinks we're better than other animals. So I mean, it shows you right there, but it's just a lack of comprehension in my eyes, I suppose.
Yeah, and I agree. The research should be shared. Now, stealing somebody's research and presenting it as your own, that's one thing. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these, like the missing person cases that I've been told, oh, well, that's so-and-so's case. He wrote about it first. Well, so what? If you're keeping the people's name and faces out there, I didn't say it was, my original, my exclusive.
Yes,
But
exactly.
and then one of these persons, I won't name his name, but a lot of people that accuse me of writing his coattails or whatever, where does he get his research? There were books written years, sometimes decades before his books that had the same stories, but he doesn't cite his resources. So there you go.
Preach, preach. Exactly. No,
It gets, tiresome sometimes. People say, oh, you got that from so-and-so. No, I didn't. Where'd he get it from? I can read
mhm.
books too. I'm very meticulous researcher, and my wife helps me with the research and stuff. She's got 2 master's degrees. She's a better researcher than I am. But, it's just, I don't have any missing person case that I consider that's my exclusive. Now, I've had some exclusive interviews with family members and things like that, but that's different. But again, if it were my loved one that were missing, I would want everybody to talk about it, shout it from
Yes.
the rooftops, share the information. If you really care and you really want these people to be found, talk about these cases. Present however you want to present it, whether you think it's mysterious or you think a human predator took them or whatever. Talk about it. I don't try to pigeonhole everything and say, "Oh, this is spooky." There are some that are, but every case isn't that way. In fact, the majority of them can be explained away. Again, those 2 things: ill-prepared and overconfident. But
Yes.
then there's so many that doesn't fit that, where there's just nothing to go on, and those are the ones that fascinate me. But I don't consider any one missing person any more or less important than any other missing person, circumstances notwithstanding.
Again, preach, man. Someone's missing 100%. And it's okay to, as I said before, be content creators such as you and I, but just when you're being a content creator and providing what someone says is factual, we just have we have to do that. That's what we're here for. Okay. There's plenty of people out there that are content creators that do amazing things. Iwu, explore with us. They are former law enforcement, and they might even still be current, and they dive into cold cases and all kinds of real criminal type things that can be verified. Okay, they're content creators. I'm a content creator. You're a content creator. But there's a difference of claiming, as you said, you're putting out facts and proper information when in actuality it's prefabricated. And there's also a huge curve where people don't want to hear other people's insights. And I mean, for example, like I think David Paulides has done amazing work, but I also have tried to reach out to him and others have as well. And he doesn't want to talk to any of us or really anyone outside of what he's trying to do. So basically, he's in his own, I guess, puddle with his theories and stuff, which is totally cool. I mean, if that's how you want to approach it. But I also do know there's certain times where there have been things that have been left out that make it fit his narrative. And I feel like if you're going to approach a topic, you can't just, I'll speak for myself here. I'm not here just to play in my own puddle. If I was here to do that, then what's the point of any of this?
Yeah, I'm not going to cherry pick cases to fit some spooky narrative to sell books. That's no shade on anybody, but that's just
exactly
not the way I roll.
And I'm with you with that fully. So, and I think you do an amazing job. And like I said, I consider you a legend, man. And you are.
I don't know about that, but thank you.
No, it's the truth, man. Before like right now, I'm so stacked up with backed up cases and things. But when I used to have a ton of more free time when I was working on things, I listened to pretty much like all your stuff. And then, like I said, when I was given an opportunity to dive in with the organization I'm working with now, the North American Dogman Project, and Jody Cook and others, I just started putting together all those pieces that I never really had time to, or I guess even put some
I'll
thought
just say that you're doing a great job over there with just the degree of research. And again, you don't claim that it's any one thing over another. Here's the facts as I've found them. If I've researched them and dug them up, make your own conclusions. I'm not trying to make up anybody's mind, or I encourage people to think for themselves. I'm not going to tell you what to think. I encourage you to think for yourself. But here's what I've found. And I think that's the best way to approach it.
And just be, like you said, and just be like respectful about it. And again, that's like why I give a huge kudos to Les Stroud and how he approaches it. Again, same thing. He's not going to sit there and he tells you that. I'm not going to force feed you that I think Sasquatch and Bigfoot exist. I don't know.
Sometimes digging through and even from named sources, like I've covered cases where I've researched. The law enforcement says one thing, the Charlie Project says something different. NamUs has it a little different than that. And then there are certain things that just somebody will state it and it'll get like in the public, the hive mind, and everybody believes this, but that wasn't the way it was, and just you come up against that. I get those just like the one sentence comment. I had one the other day, like, Dennis Martin's skeleton was found years ago. Oh, really? Well, I'm sure his father would have loved to have known that. That would have been front page news, at least all over the South. No, there was one guy that was ginseng hunting, poaching in the national park that claimed to have found a child skull back in, I think, sometime in the 60s or 70s, hid it in a hollow stump or a hollow tree, and then didn't tell anybody about it till the 80s. Well, they go back to look for it. It's not there, surprise. But again, they don't know if he's even telling the truth or not. But that, to me, that doesn't say that that's solved. Like the Death Valley Germans, that's one that people want to argue with about. And there was a guy that went out and walked the route. They did find DNA evidence for one of that party, but the others, they don't really know what happened to all of them. Just because they found bones near their vehicle, that doesn't mean it was their bones, and they were deteriorated to the point where they couldn't test for DNA. I may be getting this off kilter, but anyway, based on the research that I've done, it wasn't a completely open and shut case. I mean, there's a lot of bones out in Death Valley. Let me tell you, I've been out there. I didn't see any human bones, but in fact, there's a website where the bodies that they've found in the Mojave, and some of it's just skeletons and things. They're trying to identify those. There are lots of Jane and John Does out there. But again, just because they found bones near their vehicle doesn't necessarily mean it was them. What if they gave up and started walking and somebody else took their vehicle and they perished? You can't factor an unknown. But I try to just report things to the best of my ability based on the information that's available from trusted sources like law enforcement or search and rescue or what have you, people, the boots on the ground, the people that get out there. And again, Charlie Project, NamUs, they don't update those. I've covered, picked up a lead on a case and gone and looked at it. And according to NamUs or the Charlie Project, they're still missing. But then on further research, they were found years later, their remains. And that's, a missing person will be front page news. But sometimes when their remains are found, that's, buried on the back of page 12 or whatever. It's not as sensational. And a lot of that, it is news driven. I mean, that's how that works. It's to sell commercials or to sell newspapers or whatever. And I've found, and I don't know if you've run into this, but some of the older newspapers would run sensational stories that only maybe had a nugget of truth in there. And, a lot of one-offs and things, but you couldn't always trust the papers.
No, and that's so true. And that's super unfortunate because some of those older news clippings, like you said, yeah, there's just somebody trying to sell a story and take a liberty 100%. And it's unfortunate, but as you stated, just the way you approach it is really the way it just needs to be approached at the end of the day, because there's going to be so much misinformation purposely put out there. And also just things that aren't going to be paid attention to. And that's just what I mean about hoaxing now, this day and age, where that guy that claimed that skull, or the other people that claim this happened, or they had this, or they killed the dog man, it's all for clout and publicity. I mean, and not all of it, obviously, but why else did that guy say that? It's just, or why else do people claim that they take credit for kills sometimes when they didn't even kill somebody? It was some other killer or something like that. It's just one of those things, unfortunately, to just kind of, I guess, put a notch on your belt, and it's just not a good way to approach it. But no, like I said, I think you do an amazing job, and it's really just super important to get the information out there properly. And if it is a shorter encounter, people need to understand that's important. Oh, it's so boring. Well, when I'm not in here to tell you, if someone's encounter is 10 seconds long and that's what happened, that's what happened. Okay, if someone has a 20-minute encounter, well, okay. But if someone just sees it walk across the road and it stands up for a second or just darts across, so that's what happened. And that's important to document, though. And they're like, why? What do you mean, why? Because it still tells you about gait pattern, locations, things that we can look into. Okay, well, if it was spotted here, how many other people have spotted it around this time? Are there cave systems there? Are there missing people? And the average individual just doesn't seem to grasp that.
Yeah, and sometimes those shorter encounters are the most amazing ones. I heard one when I was living in New Mexico about a truck driver that had pulled over on the side of the road and on a 2-lane highway, guardrails. Well, he sees a deer coming down the hill, and as it gets to the guardrail, it changes into a man, steps over the guardrail, walks across the road, steps over the guardrail on the other side, turns back into a deer, and runs off into the woods. Took, probably 10 seconds. But what an amazing story. What on earth was that? There's just, it boggles the mind. It truly does.
No, 100%. And you can't put a better explanation to that, like you just said. And I just think at the end of the day, all I ask is just, people look at what's presented and look at what we don't have answers for, and
you could have padded that out. You could have said, well, what kind of grass was growing in the field? What did the guardrail look like? What kind of truck you were driving? What was the man when he turned from a deer into a man? What was he wearing? You could have made it, but just that nugget of the story, that's enough right there. It doesn't need any embellishment.
Exactly. And that's so perfectly the way it needs to be. Is, it's no different than when people claim something is quote unquote reality on TV. It's not. Reality is stepping outside, looking up at the sky and tripping over your stairs or something. Okay.
Put your phone down and get out there and look up if you're in the forest.
Yes.
We talked about that.
Yes.
Well, Star Fox, unfortunately, we're almost out of time here. Those 2 hours flew by. I'll have to have you back sometime soon. But as we part here, let the people know where they can find you. And I'll also put links in the show notes.
Yeah, perfect. I can't wait to sit down with you again. And I also would love to have you on my own podcast, Midnight.
Absolutely. Just let me know.
Yeah, of course. And anyone can find me pretty easy. It's all lowercase. It's just starfox_media. I'll definitely send you over the links. And what I'm most active on is definitely my YouTube and my 207 NADP Dogman group, which is on Facebook. And I'll toss you a link for that as well. If I don't answer anyone that does try to join that immediately, there's plenty of administrators and monitors that will get to you right off, and I will respond to you. And those are probably the areas that I'm most active on right there, just trying to answer questions for people and provide information.
Awesome. Big fan, and you're doing a great work there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get us on out of here. You've been listening to everything out there on the Clyde Lewis Ground Zero Radio Network. I'm Steve Stockton. I'll see you a little further on down the trail. Tell your animals I said hi. Good night, everybody.